There is a universe inside your head right now, a cosmos more complex than all the stars in the sky, more intricate than any machine ever built, more mysterious than the deepest ocean. And yet you carry it with you everywhere you go, never seeing it, never touching it, barely understanding it. Tonight we're going to explore something that has puzzled philosophers for thousands of years and scientists for hundreds. Something that makes you you. Something that allowed a species of hairless apes to go from cowering in caves to landing on the moon. Something so extraordinary that it created art, music, mathematics, love, and every word you've ever spoken. Human intelligence. But here's the strange part. The thing trying to understand intelligence is intelligence itself, your brain, attempting to comprehend its own existence, a garden trying to map its own roots, a mystery investigating itself. Right now, as you listen to these words, roughly 86 billion neurons are firing in your skull, each one connected to thousands of others, creating a web of communication so vast that if you tried to count every connection, you'd be counting for over 3 million years. And somehow, from this biological lightning storm, emerges the ability to wonder, to question, to dream. What makes one person a mathematical genius and another a master painter? Why can some people remember every detail of their childhood while others barely recall yesterday? How does a 3-pound organ made of fat and water create Shakespeare's sonnets or Einstein's equations? And perhaps most haunting of all, where does consciousness come from? That feeling of being you right now in this moment. The ancient Greeks believed intelligence was a gift from the gods. Medieval scholars thought it resided in the heart. Even today, with all our brain scanners and neuroscience, we're only beginning to scratch the surface. There are secrets hiding in the folds of your cortex that we may never fully unravel. But we're going to try. Over the next hour or so, we're going to explore 100 soft, dreamy facts about human intelligence. We'll journey back millions of years to when our ancestors' brains first began to grow. We'll dive into the architecture of thought itself, exploring the neural pathways that light up when you have an idea. We'll discover why you forget where you put your keys, but remember the lyrics to a song from 20 years ago. We'll meet people who can calculate impossible equations in seconds, but struggle to tie their shoes. We'll explore the mystery of consciousness, that strange sensation of being aware that you're aware. This isn't going to be a lecture. Think of it more like a guided meditation through the landscape of the mind, a gentle exploration of what makes humans so remarkably, beautifully, strangely intelligent. Some of what you'll hear might surprise you. Some of it might make you question everything you thought you knew about thinking itself. And here's something fascinating we'll discover along the way. Intelligence isn't just one thing. It's not a single light switch that's either on or off. It's more like a garden with 1,000 different flowers, each blooming in its own season, each beautiful in its own way. You might not be able to solve complex calculus, but perhaps you can read a room's emotional temperature in seconds. You might struggle with words, but see the world in colors and shapes that others miss. Intelligence has been wearing a disguise all along, pretending to be simple when it's actually infinitely complex. But there's something we haven't talked about yet. Something that happened millions of years ago that changed everything. A mysterious event in our evolutionary past that scientists still argue about today. something that took our ancestors from being just another primate in the forest to becoming the species that would one day wonder about its own wondering. What was it? What sparked the flame of human consciousness? And why did it happen to us and not to the other great apes who shared our world? We'll begin to uncover that mystery in just a moment. Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable mystery of human intelligence, the invisible force that shapes everything we are and everything we create. From the moment our ancestors first gazed at the stars to the modern minds unraveling the secrets of the universe, intelligence has been our greatest companion. We'll explore 100 soft, dreamy facts about how your brain works, how intelligence evolved, and the beautiful mystery of consciousness itself. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, get into your blanket, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine Africa 2 million years ago. The sun is setting over the savannah, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. In the tall grass, a small group of beings walks upright on two legs. They look almost human, but not quite, or their brows are heavy, their bodies covered in more hair, their brains about half the size of yours. These are our ancestors, and they're about to embark on a journey that will change the course of life on Earth. They don't know it yet, but something extraordinary is beginning to happen inside their skulls, something that will take millions of years to fully unfold. The first seeds of human intelligence are being planted. Fact number one: around 2 million years ago, the human brain began to grow at a rate never seen before in evolutionary history. Our ancestor Homo habilis had a brain about 600 cubic centimeters in volume. Within just 1.5 million years, this would nearly triple. Scientists call this the Great Encephalization, and they're still debating exactly why it happened. But happen it did, and nothing would ever be the same. But a bigger brain alone wasn't enough. A brain is expensive. It needs fuel, constant fuel, an enormous amount of energy to keep all those neurons firing. This created a problem. How could these early humans feed such a hungry organ? The answer came from fire. Fact number two: the discovery of fire, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million years ago, was perhaps the most important moment in the development of human intelligence. Not just because fire provided warmth and protection, though it did. Not just because it allowed our ancestors to see in the dark, though that helped too, but because fire changed how we ate. Cooking food is like pre-digesting it outside your body. When you cook meat, you break down the tough proteins and make them easier to absorb. When you cook vegetables, you unlock nutrients that raw food keeps locked away. Suddenly, our ancestors could extract far more calories from the same amount of food, and all those extra calories went straight to feeding their growing brains. There's something poetic about this. Intelligence literally fed itself. The smarter our ancestors became, the better they got at finding and preparing food, which made their brains grow larger, which made them smarter still. A beautiful loop, spinning forward through time. Fact number three: but food wasn't the only thing changing our ancestors' brains. They were starting to make tools. At first, these were simple: a rock chipped to have a sharp edge, a stick stripped of its bark, But even these basic tools required something revolutionary: planning. To make a stone tool, you have to imagine the tool before it exists. You have to see, in your mind's eye, the sharp edge hidden inside the rough stone. You have to strike the stone at just the right angle, with just the right force. And if you mess up, you have to learn from the mistake and try again. This simple act of tool making was actually rewiring the brain, creating new neural pathways, strengthening connections between the regions that control vision, motor skills, and abstract thought. And here's what's beautiful: once you've made a tool, you can teach someone else to make it. Knowledge could now flow from one mind to another, from one generation to the next. Fact number 4. This brings us to perhaps the most important development of all: language. No one knows exactly when human language emerged. Some scientists think it was as early as 2 million years ago. Others believe it came much later, maybe only 100,000 years ago. But whenever it happened, it changed everything. With language, intelligence became collective. An idea that sparked in one mind could be shared with 10 minds, 100 minds, 1,000 minds. A lesson learned through bitter experience could be passed down to children and grandchildren, saving them from making the same mistakes. Language allowed humans to build on the knowledge of those who came before, creating an ever growing library of understanding. Think about what you know. Most of it you didn't discover yourself, you learned it from others through their words. Language made every human brain part of a larger network, a hive mind that spanned generations. Fact number 5. But our ancestors weren't just talking about where to find food or how to avoid predators. Something else was emerging, something that would set humans apart from every other species on Earth. They were beginning to cooperate in ways no other animal could. Human cooperation is strange and beautiful. We help people we've never met. We make sacrifices for the group. We trust strangers based on nothing more than shared symbols and stories. This kind of cooperation required a new kind of intelligence: the ability to read faces, to understand intentions, to predict what others might do, the ability to build trust, and to know when that trust was being betrayed. Fact number 6. Our ancestors' brains were developing specialized regions for recognizing faces. To this day, you have an area in your brain called the fusiform face area that does almost nothing except identify faces. It's so good at its job that you see faces everywhere: in clouds, in rock formations, in the arrangement of electrical outlets on a wall. This wasn't an accident. For our ancestors, being able to quickly recognize friend from foe, to read emotion in an expression, could mean the difference between life and death. Fact number 7. And then something unexpected happened. Our ancestors started creating art. In caves across Europe, Africa, and Asia, they painted images on stone walls: handprints, animals, geometric patterns, scenes of hunts. These weren't practical. They didn't help find food or build shelter. They served some other purpose, something harder to define. These cave paintings are evidence of abstract thinking, of imagination, of the ability to create something purely because it's beautiful or meaningful. They show that our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were thinking about life, trying to make sense of it, leaving messages for the future. Fact number 8. Around the same time, evidence suggests that our ancestors were telling stories, not just sharing information, but creating narratives. Stories about where they came from, why the sun rises, what happens after death. These stories served a purpose beyond entertainment. They created shared beliefs, shared identities. They turned groups of individuals into tribes, into cultures, into civilizations. Your brain is wired for story. When you hear a good story, multiple regions of your brain light up, simulating the experiences being described. Stories are how we make sense of the chaos of existence, how we pass down wisdom, how we connect with others across time and space. Fact number 9. As our ancestors spread across the globe, leaving Africa and populating every continent, they faced new challenges, different climates, different predators, different food sources. Each challenge required adaptation, creativity, problem solving. The humans who settled in the frozen north had to figure out how to survive months of darkness and cold. Those who reached the islands of the Pacific had to master ocean navigation, reading stars and currents. Every new environment sculpted intelligence in slightly different ways. The diversity of human cultures is, in a sense, the diversity of human problem solving, different solutions to the fundamental question of how to survive and thrive. Fact number 10. And here's something that might surprise you. Our ancestors were making music. Bone flutes dating back 40,000 years have been found in caves, but music likely goes back even further. Music requires pattern recognition, rhythm, the ability to predict what comes next. It engages multiple areas of the brain at once. Some scientists believe music might have even come before language, that our ancestors were humming and drumming before they were talking. Music has no obvious survival value. It doesn't help you hunt or gather, but it does something else. It synchronizes groups. It creates shared emotional experiences. It binds people together in a way that words alone cannot. So there they are, our ancestors, gathered around a fire under a sky full of stars. They're making tools, sharing stories, creating art, making music. Their brains are growing, changing, becoming more complex with each passing generation. But something is still missing, the final piece of the puzzle, the thing that would push human intelligence beyond anything the world had ever seen. What was it? The answer lies in what happened next, in the architecture that was being built inside those growing brains, a structure so intricate, so impossibly complex, that we're only now beginning to understand it. And that's where our journey continues. Your brain weighs about 3 pounds, soft, wrinkled, the consistency of firm tofu. If you could hold it in your hands, it wouldn't look particularly impressive. No flashing lights, no obvious machinery, just pinkish gray tissue folded in on itself like a crumpled piece of paper. And yet, this unremarkable looking organ is the most complex structure we know of in the entire universe. Fact number 11. Inside your skull right now are approximately 86 billion neurons. To put that in perspective, that's more than 10 times the number of people who have ever lived on Earth. Each of these neurons is a living cell, sending electrical signals at speeds up to 268 miles per hour. They never rest, never stop working, firing patterns of electricity that somehow become your thoughts, your memories, your sense of self. But the neurons themselves aren't even the most impressive part. Fact number 12. Each neuron can connect to anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 other neurons. These connections are called synapses, and you have roughly 100 trillion of them. If you tried to count every synapse in your brain at a rate of 1 per second, you would be counting for over 3 million years. These connections form a network so vast and intricate that it makes the entire internet look simple by comparison. Think about that for a moment. The internet, with all its websites, all its data, all its connections spanning the globe, is less complex than the 3 pound universe inside your head. Fact number 13. But here's where it gets even stranger. Your brain is expensive to run, really expensive. It makes up only about 2% of your body weight, but it consumes roughly 20% of your total energy. When you're just sitting still doing nothing, your brain is burning through about 20 watts of power. That's enough to light up a dim bulb. Why does it need so much energy? Because thinking is hard work. Every thought, every memory, every sensation requires neurons to fire, and firing requires fuel. Your brain runs on glucose, the simple sugar that comes from the food you eat. When you're deep in concentration, working on a difficult problem, your brain's energy consumption can spike even higher. This is why mental exhaustion feels so real. Your brain actually is tired, depleted of resources. Fact number 14. Now, let's talk about how information travels through this incredible network. When a neuron fires, it sends an electrical signal down a long tail called an axon. This signal is fast, but the brain found a way to make it even faster. Many axons are wrapped in a fatty substance called myelin. Myelin acts like insulation on a wire, allowing the electrical signal to jump along the axon rather than traveling continuously. This can speed up transmission by up to 100 times. The more you practice something, the more myelin builds up around the relevant neural pathways. This is why skills become automatic with practice. The signal literally travels faster. What once required conscious effort becomes second nature. Fact number 15. Your brain isn't just one unified thing, it's more like a collection of specialized neighborhoods, each handling different tasks. The visual cortex at the back processes what you see. The auditory cortex on the sides handles sound. The motor cortex controls movement. The prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead, is where the magic of executive function happens. Planning, decision making, controlling impulses, imagining the future. Each region talks to the others constantly, sharing information, coordinating responses. When you bite into an apple, your visual cortex processes the color. Your motor cortex coordinates the bite. Your taste and smell regions activate. Your memory centers recall other apples you've eaten, and your prefrontal cortex might remind you that you're supposed to be on a diet. All of this happens in less than a second, seamlessly integrated into a single unified experience. Fact number 16. There's an old myth that we only use 10% of our brains. This isn't true. Brain imaging studies show that even during sleep, all regions of your brain show some activity. However, at any given moment, only a small fraction of your neurons are firing at once. If all 86 billion neurons fired simultaneously, you'd have a seizure, the pattern of which neurons fire and when is what creates thought. Your brain is like an orchestra where the music comes not from every instrument playing at once, but from the careful coordination of when each instrument plays. Fact number 17. The left and right hemispheres of your brain are connected by a thick bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. This structure contains about 200 million axons, making it the brain's largest communication highway. The two hemispheres do specialize to some degree. For most people, the left hemisphere is more involved in language and logical reasoning, while the right handles spatial awareness and recognizing faces. But the popular idea that people are either left brained or right brained is oversimplified. Both hemispheres work together on almost every task. In rare medical cases where the corpus callosum is severed to treat severe epilepsy, something fascinating happens. The two hemispheres can no longer communicate directly, and patients sometimes exhibit split behavior. The left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, might button up a shirt, while the right hand, controlled by the left hemisphere, tries to unbutton it. Each hemisphere seems to have its own intentions. Fact number 18. Where's something that might change how you think about thinking? Your brain is constantly changing, physically reshaping itself based on your experiences. This is called neuroplasticity, and it happens throughout your entire life, though it's most dramatic in childhood. When you learn a new skill, new synaptic connections form. When you practice that skill, those connections strengthen. When you stop using a skill, the connections weaken and may eventually disappear. London taxi drivers provide a perfect example. To get a license, they must memorize every street in central London, a process that takes years. Brain scans show that their hippocampus, a region involved in spatial memory, is actually larger than average. The brain physically grew new tissue in response to the demands placed on it. But here's the catch. That same brain region was smaller in areas related to other types of memory. The brain has limits. When it devotes resources to one area, it may pull them from another. Intelligence isn't infinite. It's more like a sculptor working with a finite amount of clay, shaping it to meet the demands of the environment. Fact number 19. Inside your brain are two very different types of tissue, gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is where the neuron cell bodies live, where the actual processing happens. White matter is made up of those myelin wrapped axons, the highways that connect different regions. You need both. Gray matter does the thinking. White matter allows different parts of the brain to work together. As you age, the balance between gray and white matter shifts. Children have less white matter because those long range connections are still forming. By adolescence, white matter increases dramatically as the brain integrates its various regions into a more unified whole. This is why teenagers sometimes struggle with impulse control. Their prefrontal cortex isn't fully connected yet. The brake pedal exists, but the wiring to it isn't complete. Fact number 20. Let's end this section with perhaps the most mysterious aspect of brain architecture. Your brain has different levels of processing, different layers of awareness. At the deepest level is the brain's stem, ancient and automatic, controlling breathing and heartbeat without any conscious input. Above that is the limbic system, the emotional brain, reacting to threats and rewards with feelings before you even know why. And finally, the cortex, particularly the prefrontal cortex, the rational brain that can override instinct and emotion with logic and planning. These three levels don't always agree. You might consciously know that there's nothing to fear, but your limbic system triggers anxiety anyway. You might rationally want to save money, but the emotional pull of that shiny new purchase overrides your better judgment. Human behavior is often a negotiation between these different levels of the brain, each with its own priorities, each trying to steer the ship. So here we are, standing at the edge of understanding. We've seen the physical structure, the neurons and synapses, the regions and connections. We've glimpsed how this biological machine operates, how electricity becomes thought, how tissue becomes mind. But we haven't yet answered the deeper question. How does all of this create memory? How do moments become permanent, etched into the architecture of the brain? Why do you remember some things perfectly and forget others completely? The answer takes us into even stranger territory, into a realm where the solid structure we've been exploring becomes fluid, where the past is constantly being rewritten, where forgetting might actually be a sign of intelligence rather than its failure. That's where we're going next. There's a man who remembers everything, every day of his life since adolescence, stored in perfect detail. Tell him a date, any date, and he can tell you what he ate for breakfast, what the weather was like, what shirt he was wearing, what happened in the news. His name was Solomon Shereshevsky, and he was studied by Russian neuropsychologist Alexander Luria in the 1920s. You might think this sounds like a gift: total recall, perfect memory, never forgetting a face, a name, a fact, a moment. But Shereshevsky described it as a curse. He couldn't think abstractly because his mind was cluttered with concrete details. He couldn't understand poetry because every word triggered a cascade of specific memories that distracted him from the meaning. He couldn't recognize faces well because each time he saw someone, they looked slightly different, and he remembered all the different versions. His perfect memory made it nearly impossible to function. This tells us something profound about how memory is supposed to work. It's not meant to be perfect, it's meant to be useful. Fact number 21: memories are not stored in a single location in your brain like files on a computer hard drive. Instead, they're distributed across multiple regions, each holding a different aspect of the experience. The visual details might be stored in the visual cortex, the sounds in the auditory cortex, the emotions in the amygdala, the context and location in the hippocampus. When you remember something, your brain reassembles all these pieces, reconstructing the memory from scattered fragments. This is why memories feel so real and vivid. Your brain isn't playing back a recording, it's actively recreating the experience, lighting up the same regions that were active when the memory was first formed. In a very real sense, remembering is a form of time travel, your brain simulating the past and the present. Fact number 22: the hippocampus, a small seahorse shaped structure deep in your brain, acts as a sort of memory gatekeeper. It decides what gets stored long term and what gets discarded. Throughout the day, you experience thousands of moments, most of them routine and unremarkable. Your hippocampus filters these, passing along only the experiences that seem important for long term storage in the cortex. But the hippocampus can be fooled. It prioritizes memories that are emotional, unusual, or frequently repeated. This is why you remember your first kiss, but not what you had for lunch last Tuesday. This is why traumatic events can be seared into memory with painful clarity. The hippocampus is trying to help you survive by remembering what matters, but sometimes what matters most isn't what's most useful to remember. Fact number 23. Here's something that might surprise you. Your short term memory, also called working memory, can only hold about 7 items at once, give or take 2. This was discovered by cognitive psychologist George Miller in 1956, and it's held up remarkably well. Try to remember a phone number someone just told you. 7 digits, no problem. 10 digits, you'll probably struggle unless you chunk them into groups. This limitation isn't a flaw, it's a feature. If your conscious mind tried to hold everything at once, you'd be overwhelmed, paralyzed by information. The limitation forces you to focus, to prioritize, to decide what's important right now. It's your brain's way of keeping you sane in a world of infinite stimulation. Fact number 24. Sleep is when memories move from temporary storage to permanent storage. During deep sleep, your hippocampus replays the day's experiences to your cortex, strengthening the neural connections that encode those memories. This process is called memory consolidation. If you learn something new and then sleep, you'll remember it better than if you stayed awake. This is why pulling all-nighters before exams is such a bad strategy. You might cram information into short-term memory, but without sleep, it never makes the journey to long-term storage. Even more fascinating, during REM sleep, when you dream, your brain seems to be integrating new memories with old ones, finding patterns, making connections. Dreams might be the brain's way of organizing its library, filing new books and cross referencing them with what's already on the shelves. Fact number 25. Emotions are like superglue for memories. The amygdala, your brain's emotional center, works closely with the hippocampus. When something makes you feel strongly, whether joy, fear, anger, or sadness, the amygdala signals to the hippocampus that this memory is important. This is why you remember emotionally charged events more vividly than neutral ones. Your wedding day, the birth of a child, the death of a loved one. These memories are burned in, preserved with almost painful clarity. But there's a dark side. Traumatic memories can become too strong, too persistent. PTSD is in some ways a memory disorder where the brain can't properly store and integrate a traumatic experience. The memory remains hyperactive, intrusive, as if it's happening in the present rather than the past. Fact number 26. Most people have almost no memories from before age 3. This phenomenon is called childhood amnesia, and it's not because nothing important happened in those early years. The problem is that the hippocampus isn't fully developed yet. Babies and toddlers are learning at an incredible rate, forming millions of new neural connections every day. But those experiences aren't being encoded into long-term declarative memory the way later experiences will be. You lived through those years, laughed and cried, and explored the world with wonder, but those memories are lost to you now, like dreams that fade upon waking. In a very real sense, the you of today never knew the you of infancy. Fact number 27. False memories are shockingly easy to create. In studies, researchers have convinced people they were lost in a shopping mall as a child, an event that never happened. They've made people believe they shook hands with Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, which is impossible since Bugs Bunny is a Warner Brothers character. Every time you recall a memory, you're not accessing the original. You're accessing the last time you remembered it. And each time, the memory can change slightly, details added or subtracted, until the memory you have is quite different from what actually happened. This is unsettling. It means your past, the story you tell yourself about who you are and where you came from, might not be entirely accurate. Your autobiography is part truth, part fiction, and you can't always tell which is which. Fact number 28. Here's a strange type of memory most people don't think about: muscle memory. The ability to ride a bike, type on a keyboard, play a musical instrument. These skills are stored not in your hippocampus, but in your cerebellum and basal ganglia, structures involved in motor control. You can lose your declarative memories, forget your own name, and still be able to play piano if you learned it years ago. The body remembers what the mind forgets. This is why motor skills, once learned, are so hard to unlearn. Try to change your golf swing or your typing technique. It feels almost impossible. The neural pathways are deeply carved, automatic, resistant to change. Your conscious mind isn't even involved anymore. The body knows what to do. Fact number G. Of all your senses, smell is most closely linked to memory. The olfactory bulb, which processes smell, has direct connections to the hippocampus and amygdala. This is why a particular scent can instantly transport you back in time. The smell of baking bread might conjure your grandmother's kitchen. The scent of a particular perfume might bring back memories of a lost love. These smell triggered memories are often more emotional and vivid than memories triggered by other senses. Scientists aren't entirely sure why smell has this special relationship with memory, but it might be because smell is one of our oldest senses, evolutionarily speaking. Long before complex vision or language, our ancestors were navigating the world through scent, and that ancient pathway still exists in our brains. Fact number 30. Finally, here's something that might change how you feel about forgetting. Forgetting isn't a failure of memory, it's a feature. Your brain actively, intentionally forgets most of what you experience. If you remembered everything, like Solomon Shirashevsky, you'd be unable to extract patterns, unable to see the forest for the trees. Forgetting allows you to generalize, to form concepts, to think abstractly. In fact, recent research suggests that forgetting might be a sign of a healthy, intelligent brain. The brain is constantly making decisions about what to keep and what to discard, optimizing for what's useful rather than what's comprehensive. A perfect memory would be a dysfunctional memory. Sometimes wisdom is knowing what not to remember. So memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction, an edited highlight reel that's constantly being rewritten. The past doesn't exist anywhere except in the present, in the patterns of neurons firing right now as you remember. You are, in a very real sense, a story you're telling yourself, revised with each telling, shaped by emotion and need, and the limitations of biology. But if memory is how we store the past, learning is how we prepare for the future. And that's the next mystery we need to explore. How does the brain change itself? How do we go from not knowing something to knowing it? And why does learning sometimes feel effortless while other times it feels impossible? The answers are waiting just ahead. There's a window in childhood, a brief and precious time when learning certain things is almost effortless. Languages, especially a child growing up hearing multiple languages, will speak all of them fluently, without accent, without conscious effort. The brain just absorbs them, builds the neural pathways automatically. But wait too long, past age 7 or 8, and that window begins to close. Adults can still learn new languages, but it's harder, slower, requires conscious effort and practice. The accent usually remains. The grammar never feels quite as natural. Something has changed in the brain. Some door has closed. This tells us something important. The brain isn't static, it changes over time, becoming more specialized, more efficient, but also less flexible. Learning is a race against these closing windows, a negotiation between the brain you have now and the brain you're becoming. Fact number 31. The period from birth to age 3 is the most explosive learning phase of human life. The baby's brain forms more than 1 million neural connections every second. This isn't an exaggeration. 1 million per second. The brain is building itself, wiring itself based on the experiences it's having. Every sound heard, every face seen, every texture touched is sculpting the architecture of thought. By age 3, a child's brain has roughly twice as many synaptic connections as an adult brain. Then something remarkable happens. The brain starts pruning, eliminating connections that aren't being used. This is called synaptic pruning, and it continues through adolescence. Use it or lose it. The brain is becoming more efficient, keeping the pathways that matter and discarding the rest. Fact number 32. But learning doesn't stop in adulthood. Far from it. While it's true that children's brains are more plastic, more flexible, adults have something children lack: context. Adults can learn more efficiently in some ways because they can connect new information to vast networks of existing knowledge. When you learn something new as an adult, you're not building from scratch, you're integrating, connecting, expanding. The adult brain can still form new neurons, a process called neurogenesis. For a long time, scientists believed this was impossible, that you were born with all the neurons you'd ever have. But in the 1990s, researchers discovered neurogenesis in the hippocampus, continuing throughout adult life. Learning, exercise, and novel experiences all boost neurogenesis. The brain remains capable of growth, just at a slower pace. Fact number 33. There's a powerful learning technique that most people don't use enough. It's called the spacing effect. If you want to remember something long term, don't study it all at once. Space out your learning sessions over days or weeks. This feels less efficient because you have to work harder to recall the information each time. But that effort is exactly what strengthens the memory. Cramming might work for a test tomorrow, but a week later, you'll have forgotten most of it. Spaced repetition, on the other hand, builds memories that last. This is because each time you retrieve a memory, you strengthen the neural pathway. The harder the retrieval, the more the pathway strengthens. Forgetting and then remembering is more powerful than never forgetting in the first place. Fact number 34. Active recall is another underused learning strategy. Reading and rereading information feels like learning, but it's actually one of the least effective methods. Instead, try to recall the information without looking. Quiz yourself. Explain it out loud to an imaginary audience. Force your brain to retrieve the information rather than passively recognizing it. The act of retrieval itself is what creates learning. This is why teaching is so effective. When you teach something to someone else, you have to organize the information, recall it, explain it in different ways. Each of these acts strengthens your own understanding. If you really want to learn something, find someone to teach it to. Fact number 35. Here's a beautiful piece of neuroscience. When you learn something new, your brain physically changes. New dendritic spines grow on neurons, creating new connections. Existing connections strengthen. The structure of your brain is literally different than it was before you learned. Learning isn't just about information, it's about transformation. You become, in a physical sense, a different person. This process takes time, which is why you often need to sleep on a problem. You study hard, go to bed feeling confused, and wake up the next morning with sudden clarity. During sleep, your brain was working, consolidating the new information, integrating it with existing knowledge, building the physical structures that encode understanding. Fact number 36. Stress is learning's enemy. When you're stressed, your body releases cortisol, a hormone that prepares you for fight or flight. Cortisol redirects resources away from the prefrontal cortex, your center for complex thinking, and toward more primitive brain regions focused on immediate survival. This is why it's so hard to think clearly when you're anxious or frightened. Your brain has literally shut down the learning centers. Chronic stress can actually shrink the hippocampus, making it harder to form new memories. Students who study in a state of panic often do worse than those who approach learning calmly. The brain learns best when it feels safe, when it has the resources to explore and make mistakes without consequences. Fact number 37. Curiosity opens doors in the brain. When you're curious about something, when you genuinely want to know the answer, your brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation. This dopamine doesn't just make learning feel good, it actually enhances memory formation. Information learned in a state of curiosity is retained better than information learned through forced study. This is why passion makes such a difference. A child obsessed with dinosaurs will learn every species name, every geological period, absorbing information that would bore someone else to tears. It's not that they're smarter, it's that their curiosity has unlocked the brain's learning mechanisms. Fact number 38. Mistakes are not the opposite of learning. They are learning. When you make a mistake, especially if you're surprised by it, your brain pays attention. There's a region called the anterior cingulate cortex that activates when you make an error. It's like an alarm bell, signaling that reality didn't match expectation, that there's something new to learn. Students who are allowed to make mistakes and learn from them often understand material more deeply than students who are simply shown the right answer. The struggle, the confusion, the moment of error, these are all part of the learning process. A too easy path teaches nothing. Fact number 39. The brain learns through patterns. When you first encounter information, it's chaotic, disconnected, but as you study, practice, and repeat, patterns emerge. Your brain loves patterns. It's constantly looking for them, trying to organize the chaos into coherent structures. This is why understanding the big picture before diving into details can be so helpful. The big picture provides a framework, a pattern to fit the details into. Mathematics is a perfect example. Students often struggle not because math is inherently hard, but because they're trying to memorize procedures without understanding the underlying patterns. Once you see the pattern, once the structure becomes clear, everything clicks into place. Learning shifts from memorization to recognition. Fact number 40. Finally, learning is lifelong. There's no age at which the brain becomes incapable of growth. Yes, childhood provides advantages, certain windows of plasticity that narrow with age, but adults who continue learning, who challenge themselves with new skills and knowledge, maintain cognitive function longer. Learning literally keeps the brain young. Studies of musicians, bilinguals, and lifelong learners show preserved cognitive abilities well into old age. The brain, like a muscle, grows stronger with use. Every new language learned, every instrument mastered, every book read is adding complexity, building cognitive reserve that protects against decline. So, learning isn't just something that happens in school, isn't just for children. It's a fundamental property of being human. Your brain is always learning, always changing, always building itself based on what you do and experience. But here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. What if intelligence itself isn't one thing? What if everything we've been talking about, memory, learning, problem solving, what if these are just a few threads in a much larger tapestry? What if you've been intelligent all along, just in ways that no one ever measured? That's the territory we're entering next. There was a boy in school who couldn't read. Letters jumbled on the page. Words refused to stay still. His teachers thought he wasn't trying hard enough. His parents worried he'd never amount to anything. He felt stupid, broken, less than everyone else. But put that same boy in a kitchen, and something magical happened. He could taste a dish once and recreate it perfectly, adjusting ingredients by instinct, understanding flavors in a way that couldn't be taught. By age 15, he was working in restaurants. By 25, he had his own. He never did learn to read well, but he became one of the most celebrated chefs in his city. Was he intelligent? The school system said no. His bank account said yes. His customers, tasting his food, experiencing art on a plate, would have laughed at the question. Of course he was intelligent, just not in the way schools measure. Fact number 41. In 1983, psychologist Howard Gardner proposed a theory that changed how we think about intelligence. He argued that there isn't one kind of intelligence, but multiple intelligences, each independent, each valuable. Traditional IQ tests, he said, only measure a narrow slice of human capability, mostly linguistic and logical mathematical skills. But intelligence is so much broader than that. Gardner identified 8 types of intelligence, though he acknowledged there might be more. This wasn't just a feel good theory to make everyone feel smart. It was based on brain research, on studying people with brain damage who lost one ability but retained others, on observing child prodigies who excelled in one area while being average in others. Fact number 42. Linguistic intelligence is the ability to use words effectively, whether spoken or written. Poets have it. Lawyers have it. That friend who always knows exactly what to say in difficult situations has it. If you love playing with language, if words come easily to you, if you can persuade and explain and tell stories that captivate, you have high linguistic intelligence. But here's what's interesting. Many people with high linguistic intelligence in their native language struggle when learning a second language. The skill isn't just about words in general, it's deeply connected to the specific language you grew up with, the neural pathways built during those critical early years. Fact number 43. Logical mathematical intelligence is what traditional IQ tests measure most heavily. This is the ability to think in patterns, to understand cause and effect, to reason abstractly. Scientists have it, programmers have it, chess masters have it. If you love puzzles, if you can look at complex systems and understand how the pieces fit together, if numbers feel like a natural language to you, this is your strength. But someone can be brilliant in mathematics and completely lost when it comes to understanding people. Intelligence in one domain doesn't guarantee intelligence in another. The brain's modules don't always communicate as well as we'd like. Fact number 44. Spatial intelligence is the ability to think in three dimensions, to manipulate images in your mind, to understand how objects relate to each other in space. Architects have it. Sculptors have it. Surgeons have it. If you can pack a car trunk perfectly, if you never get lost, if you can look at blueprints and see the finished building, you have strong spatial intelligence. Some people with spatial intelligence struggle with words. They think in images, not language. Ask them to describe something, and they stumble, but show them a picture, and they understand instantly. Their intelligence speaks a different language than the verbal world often demands. Fact number 45. Musical intelligence is the ability to perceive, create, and understand music. This goes beyond just having a good ear. It's about understanding rhythm, pitch, timbre, the emotional content of sound. Mozart had it at a level that seems almost superhuman, composing symphonies in his head before writing a single note. But musical intelligence exists on a spectrum. Maybe you can't compose, but you can hear when a singer is slightly off key. Maybe you can't play an instrument, but you feel music emotionally in a way that moves you to tears. The brain's auditory processing centers are doing something sophisticated, something that has nothing to do with math or language, but is intelligence nonetheless. Fact number 46. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence is the ability to use your body skillfully, to control movement with precision. Athletes have it, dancers have it, surgeons performing delicate operations have it. If you learn by doing rather than reading, if your body seems to understand things before your mind does, this is your domain. Watch a professional basketball player. They're not just running and jumping, they're calculating trajectories in real time, predicting where other players will move, adjusting their body position with millisecond precision. This is intelligence, every bit as real as solving an equation, just expressed through muscle and movement instead of symbols on paper. Fact number 47. Interpersonal intelligence is the ability to understand other people, to read emotions, to navigate social situations with grace. Therapists have it. Teachers have it. That person who always seems to know what you're feeling before you say it has it. If you can walk into a room and sense the tension, if you know how to bring people together, if others seek you out for advice, you have high interpersonal intelligence. This type of intelligence was crucial for our ancestors' survival. Humans are social creatures, understanding the intentions of others, forming alliances, maintaining group cohesion. These skills kept our species alive. Your brain has specialized regions, like the fusiform face area and parts of the prefrontal cortex, dedicated to social cognition. Fact number 48. Intrapersonal intelligence is different. This is the ability to understand yourself, to be aware of your own emotions, motivations, and thoughts. If you're good at introspection, if you understand why you react the way you do, if you can observe your own mind with some objectivity, you have this intelligence. Intrapersonal intelligence is harder to measure than other types because it's entirely internal. Someone might have profound self awareness but never express it outwardly. Yet this intelligence might be the most important of all, knowing yourself, understanding your own patterns, being able to regulate your emotions and motivations. This is the foundation of mental health and personal growth. Fact number 49. Naturalistic intelligence is the ability to recognize and categorize plants, animals, and other elements of nature. Darwin had it. Biologists have it. Indigenous peoples who can navigate vast wilderness areas, who know which plants heal and which poison, who can predict weather by observing subtle signs, have it in abundance. In our modern urban world, this intelligence often goes unrecognized and undeveloped, but it's still there. Maybe you have a gift for gardening. Maybe you can identify birds by their calls. Maybe you understand animal behavior intuitively. This is ancient intelligence, the kind that kept our ancestors fed and safe for hundreds of thousands of years. Fact number 50. Gardner also proposed the possibility of existential intelligence, the ability to grapple with deep questions about existence, meaning, life, and death. Philosophers have it. Theologians have it. Anyone who lies awake at night, wondering why there's something rather than nothing, who ponders the nature of consciousness or the meaning of it all, is exercising this form of intelligence. This one is controversial, harder to pin down neurologically, but anyone who's felt the weight of existential questions knows this is a distinct mode of thinking, separate from logical reasoning or emotional processing. It's the human mind turning its attention to the biggest mysteries, the questions that may not have answers but demand to be asked. So here's the truth that schools often miss. You are not one number on an IQ test. You're not a single score that determines your worth or potential. You're a complex combination of strengths and weaknesses, each brain unique in its particular configuration of abilities. The person who struggles with math might be a genius at understanding people. The one who can't carry a tune might see patterns in data that others miss. The child who seems slow in school might have a body that moves with the grace and precision of an artist. Intelligence isn't a ladder with some people at the top and others at the bottom. It's a landscape with countless peaks, each valuable, each worthy of respect. The tragedy is that our society tends to value only a few of these peaks, leaving people to feel inadequate when they're actually brilliant, just in ways we haven't learned to measure or appreciate. But even this expanded view of intelligence doesn't capture the full mystery, because there's one aspect of mind that cuts across all these categories, one element that neuroscience is only beginning to understand, and that philosophers have debated for millennia: consciousness itself, that strange feeling of being you, of experiencing the world from inside your own head. Where does it come from? How does it arise from neurons and synapses? And most unsettling of all, what if your consciousness isn't what you think it is? That's the deep water we're wading into next. Right now, you are aware. You know that you're listening to these words. You have thoughts about them, feelings, maybe memories they trigger. There is something it is like to be you, a subjective experience happening inside your skull that no one else can access. This is consciousness, and it's the greatest mystery in all of science. We can measure brain activity. We can map which regions light up during different tasks. We can trace the path of signals through neural networks. But none of this explains the felt experience, the qualitative sensation of being aware. Why does the firing of neurons feel like anything at all? Why isn't there just information processing in the dark, with no inner observer, no sense of self? Philosophers call this the hard problem of consciousness, and despite centuries of thinking and decades of brain research, we're no closer to solving it. Fact number 51. Your brain creates what you experience as the present moment, but that moment is actually a reconstruction of the very recent past. When light hits your retina, when sound waves reach your eardrums, it takes time for those signals to travel to your brain and be processed. Your conscious awareness lags behind reality by about half a second. This creates a problem. If your awareness is always half a second behind, how do you catch a ball or have a conversation? The answer is that your brain predicts the present. It uses past patterns to guess what's happening right now, creating a seamless illusion of real time experience. What you're aware of isn't reality, it's your brain's best guess about reality, updated constantly, but always just a little bit behind. Fact number 52. Most of what your brain does, you never become conscious of. Studies suggest that about 95% of brain activity is unconscious. Your heart rate is regulated without your awareness. You walk without consciously controlling each muscle. You recognize faces instantly without knowing how. Consciousness is just the tip of an enormous iceberg, the small portion that breaks through the surface while the vast machinery operates below. This raises an uncomfortable question. If consciousness is such a small part of what the brain does, what is it for? Why did evolution create this inner awareness instead of just having unconscious information processing? Some scientists argue consciousness is an illusion, an unnecessary side effect. Others believe it serves a crucial function we don't yet understand, perhaps in integrating information or enabling flexible thinking. Fact number 53. There's a strange phenomenon called blind sight that reveals the gap between processing and awareness. Some people with damage to their visual cortex report being completely blind in part of their visual field. They say they see nothing, but if you throw a ball to them, they'll catch it. If you ask them to point to an object they claim they can't see, they'll point accurately while insisting they're just guessing. Their brain is processing visual information, enough to guide action, but that information never reaches consciousness. They have vision without awareness. This suggests that seeing isn't just about your eyes and visual cortex. It requires additional brain systems that create the conscious experience of sight. Fact number 54. Split brain patients offer another window into consciousness. These are people whose corpus callosum, the connection between brain hemispheres, has been severed to treat severe epilepsy. Afterward, something strange happens. The two hemispheres seem to operate independently, each with its own awareness. In experiments, researchers can present information to just one hemisphere. The left hemisphere, which controls speech, can talk about what it saw. The right hemisphere can't speak, but it can point with the left hand to indicate what it saw. Each hemisphere seems to be conscious, but of different things. So do these patients have two consciousnesses, two separate selves in one skull? The question is deeply unsettling and still debated. Fact number 55. Your brain has something called the default mode network, a set of regions that activate when you're not focused on any particular task. This is the network responsible for mind wandering, for that internal chatter that fills your thoughts when you're not actively concentrating. It's also involved in thinking about yourself, remembering the past, and imagining the future. Some researchers believe the default mode network is where the sense of self resides, the constant inner narrator that seems to be you when you meditate and try to quiet your thoughts. What you're actually doing is temporarily reducing activity in this network. Experienced meditators show less default mode activity, which might explain why they report a weakened sense of self, a feeling of being more connected to everything and less trapped in the story of me. Fact number 56. Not everyone has an inner voice. If you're like most people, you have a constant stream of words in your head, a voice that narrates your experience, comments on your thoughts, maybe even argues with itself. But about 30 to 50% of people report having no inner monologue at all. Their thinking is imagistic or abstract, not verbal. For people without an inner voice, the idea of hearing words in your head sounds strange, almost like a hallucination. For people with an inner voice, thinking without words seems impossible. Yet both groups are conscious, both intelligent. This suggests consciousness isn't tied to any particular mode of thought. It's something deeper, more fundamental than words or images. Fact number 57. Similarly, some people have aphantasia, the inability to create visual mental images. Ask them to imagine a beach, and they understand the concept but see nothing in their mind's eye. For people with vivid visual imagery, this seems incomprehensible. How can you think without pictures? But people with aphantasia navigate the world just fine, remember things, solve problems. Consciousness doesn't require mental imagery either. Fact number 58. There's a puzzle called the binding problem. Your visual experience feels unified. You see a red ball, and the color, shape, and movement all seem to belong to one object. But in your brain, these features are processed in completely different regions. Color in one area, motion in another, shape in yet another. How does the brain bind these separate pieces of information into a single unified conscious experience? We still don't know. There's no master region where it all comes together, no place in the brain where a little observer sits watching the show. Somehow, the distributed processing creates unified awareness, but the mechanism remains mysterious. Consciousness might not be located anywhere. It might be a property of the whole system, emerging from the pattern of activity across billions of neurons. Fact number 59. Here's a disturbing thought from neuroscience. When you make a decision, when you feel that moment of choosing, your brain has already decided several seconds earlier. In famous experiments by Benjamin Libet and later researchers, brain activity predicting a choice shows up before the person reports consciously deciding. It's as if the unconscious brain makes the decision, then informs consciousness after the fact. This challenges our intuition about free will. If your brain decides before you're aware of deciding, are you really choosing, or is consciousness more like a narrator, telling a story about choices that have already been made? Some philosophers argue this shows free will is an illusion. Others say the experiments don't prove what they claim, that conscious will operates in more subtle ways. The debate continues, with profound implications for how we think about responsibility, morality, and what it means to be human. Fact number 60. Consciousness remains the one thing about the brain that might be fundamentally unexplainable by neuroscience. We might map every neuron, understand every connection, predict every behavior, and still not know why it feels like something to be conscious. This is because consciousness is a subjective experience, and science deals with objective measurements. There might be an unbridgeable gap between the two. Some philosophers embrace this gap, arguing consciousness proves there's more to reality than physical matter. Others believe we'll eventually find a way to explain subjective experience in physical terms, that the hard problem will turn out to have a solution we just haven't discovered yet. And some think we're asking the wrong question entirely, that consciousness isn't a thing that needs explaining, but a confusion in how we think about the brain. What we do know is this: you are aware, you experience, and that experience, whatever it is, wherever it comes from, is real to you. The mystery of consciousness is the mystery of your own existence, of what it means to be a thinking feeling being in a universe that seems at first glance to be nothing but matter and energy following mindless laws. But consciousness isn't free floating. It doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's influenced, shaped, and sometimes controlled by forces you're not aware of, processes running beneath the surface of awareness. Your conscious mind, the part you think of as you, might not be in charge as much as you believe. And that's what we need to explore next: the hidden currents flowing beneath conscious thought, the invisible hands that guide your decisions, shape your perceptions, and influence your behavior in ways you never notice. The territory ahead is unsettling, but if you want to understand intelligence, you have to look at what's hidden as much as what's visible. You walk into a room and immediately feel uncomfortable. Nothing obvious is wrong. No one is threatening you. But something in your gut says this isn't safe. You should leave. You brush it off as irrational, stay anyway, and later discover there was indeed something wrong, something your conscious mind missed, but some deeper part of you detected. This happens all the time. You know things without knowing how you know them. You make decisions for reasons you can't articulate. You feel emotions that seem to come from nowhere. Your conscious mind is only one player in a much larger system, and often it's not the one calling the shots. Fact number 61: your gut has a mind of its own, literally, the enteric nervous system. The network of neurons lining your digestive tract contains about 100 million neurons. That's more than in your spinal cord. This gut brain communicates constantly with your head brain through the vagus nerve, sending signals that influence mood, anxiety, decision making. When you have a gut feeling, it's not just a metaphor. Your gut is actually sending signals to your brain, information processed below conscious awareness. The bacteria living in your intestines, your microbiome, also influence this communication. Studies have shown that gut bacteria can affect behavior, mood, even personality traits. The trillions of microorganisms inside you are, in a very real sense, part of your extended mind. Fact number 62: hormones flood your brain constantly, altering how you think and feel in ways you never notice. Cortisol increases when you're stressed, sharpening attention but narrowing focus. Testosterone affects confidence and risk taking. Estrogen influences memory and emotional processing. Oxytocin increases trust and social bonding. These chemical messengers operate beneath consciousness, shaping your perceptions and decisions without your awareness. A difficult conversation with your partner might feel different in the morning versus evening, simply because your hormone levels have changed. You think you're being rational, making clear headed decisions, but chemistry is guiding your thoughts in invisible ways. Fact number 63: your brain has internal clocks, circadian rhythms that regulate alertness, mood, and cognitive performance across the day. Most people have peak mental performance in late morning, a dip after lunch, and another peak in early evening. But you don't consciously notice these rhythms. You just feel more or less focused without knowing why. Night owls and morning larks aren't just preferences, they're genetic differences in circadian timing. A night owl forced to wake early isn't just tired, their entire brain is operating at the wrong phase, like trying to work in a different time zone. Intelligence is time dependent, shaped by rhythms you can't control. Fact number 64. Priming effects show how unconscious processes shape conscious thought. Show someone words related to old age, like gray, wrinkle, retirement, and they'll walk more slowly afterward without realizing why. Expose someone to images of money, and they'll be less generous in a subsequent task. Hold a warm cup of coffee, and you'll judge people as friendlier than if you'd held an iced drink. These effects seem small, even silly, but they're real and replicable. Your brain is constantly influenced by context, by recent experiences, by environmental cues you never consciously register. What you think is free, independent thinking is actually shaped by 1,000 subtle inputs you're not aware of. Fact number 65. Implicit bias is another example of unconscious processing. Your brain forms associations based on patterns in your environment, and these associations influence behavior before conscious thought gets involved. You might consciously believe all people are equal, but unconscious associations formed through media exposure, cultural narratives, and personal experiences can still influence split second judgments. This isn't about being a bad person, it's about how the brain works. The unconscious mind learns patterns to make quick decisions, a survival mechanism that helped our ancestors react fast to potential threats. But in a complex social world, these quick judgments can be inaccurate or unfair. Becoming aware of implicit bias doesn't eliminate it, but it allows you to question your initial reactions, to engage the conscious, rational mind in overriding automatic responses. Fact number 66. Intuition is unconscious pattern recognition. When experts make snap judgments in their field, they're not guessing. Our brains have internalized thousands of patterns through experience, and they're recognizing a pattern now without consciously analyzing it. A chess master sees a board position and knows the best move instantly. A doctor hears symptoms and intuits the diagnosis. A firefighter walks into a burning building and senses it's about to collapse, evacuates the team seconds before it does. Malcolm Gladwell wrote about this in Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. But intuition only works in domains where you have expertise. Trusting your gut about medical symptoms when you're not a doctor is just guessing. Trusting your gut about your field after 10,000 hours of practice is wisdom. Fact number 67. Body language affects thought in surprising ways. Stand in a power pose, hands on hips, chest out, for 2 minutes, and your testosterone rises while cortisol drops. You feel more confident, and that confidence affects performance. Slump in a chair, and you'll feel less capable. Think more negatively. Your body isn't just expressing your mental state, it's creating it. This is called embodied cognition, the idea that thinking isn't confined to the brain, but involves the whole body. The mind isn't a computer program running on the hardware of the body. Mind and body are deeply integrated, each influencing the other in continuous feedback. Fact number 68. The vagus nerve is a major highway of communication between body and brain. It carries signals from your heart, lungs, and digestive system to your brain, providing constant updates about your physical state. High vagal tone, meaning strong vagus nerve activity, is associated with better emotional regulation, social connection, and resilience to stress. You can actually strengthen your vagus nerve through practices like deep breathing, meditation, and even cold exposure. When you take a slow, deep breath and feel yourself calming, that's the vagus nerve activating the parasympathetic nervous system, telling your brain that you're safe. Consciousness and body are in constant dialogue. Fact number 69: exercise doesn't just keep your body healthy, it fundamentally changes your brain. Physical activity increases production of brain derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that promotes the growth of new neurons and synapses. People who exercise regularly have better memory, faster processing speeds, and lower rates of cognitive decline as they age. The brain evolved in a body that moved, that hunted and gathered and traveled long distances. Sitting still all day isn't just bad for your body, it's starving your brain of the signals that promote growth and maintenance. Movement is intelligence, not separate from it. Fact number 70: meditation, practiced regularly, physically changes brain structure. Studies using MRI scans show that long term meditators have thicker cortex in regions associated with attention and sensory processing, and larger hippocampus for memory. They also show reduced amygdala volume, meaning less reactivity to stress. Meditation is essentially training attention, learning to notice where your mind is, and gently redirecting it. This simple practice strengthens neural networks involved in self regulation and awareness. You're not just relaxing, you're literally reshaping your brain, building the architecture of consciousness itself. So, the conscious you, the one listening to these words right now, is influenced by gut bacteria, hormones, circadian rhythms, body posture, recent priming experiences, implicit associations, and 1,000 other factors operating beneath awareness. The self you think of as in control, making rational decisions based on conscious reasoning, is more like a rider on an elephant. You can steer a little, but the elephant goes where it wants, influenced by forces you barely understand. This might sound deterministic, like you're not really in control of anything, but that's not quite right. Becoming aware of these hidden influences gives you a choice. You can't control your gut bacteria, but you can eat foods that support a healthy microbiome. You can't change your circadian rhythm, but you can align your schedule with it. You can't eliminate implicit bias, but you can learn to notice and question automatic judgments. Intelligence includes knowing what you don't know, understanding the limits of your awareness, and working with your brain's design rather than against it. But we're not done exploring the landscape of intelligence, because there's enormous variation in how intelligence manifests, extremes and differences that show just how diverse the human mind can be. There are people who defy every category, whose brains work in ways that seem impossible, and understanding them helps us understand what intelligence actually is. There was a man named Kim Peek who could read 2 pages simultaneously, one with each eye, and remember virtually everything he read. He memorized over 12,000 books in his lifetime. Ask him about any date in history, and he could tell you what day of the week it was, what major events happened, even what the weather was like in certain cities. His memory was so vast, so detailed, that it seemed superhuman. But Kim couldn't button his own shirt. He struggled with abstract concepts. He took metaphors literally, confused by phrases like, get your act together, because he didn't understand what an act was or how you could own one. His IQ tested far below average by traditional measures. He wasn't intelligent at all. Kim Peek was the inspiration for the movie Rain Man, and he had a condition we now call savant syndrome. His story reveals something profound about intelligence. It's not a single substance that you have more or less of. It's a collection of abilities that can develop independently, sometimes spectacularly out of balance. Fact number 71. IQ tests were invented in the early 1900s by French psychologist Alfred Binet, not to measure intelligence broadly, but to identify students who needed extra help in school. The test was never meant to be a comprehensive measure of human capability, yet somehow this narrow assessment tool became the primary way society judges cognitive ability. IQ tests measure pattern recognition, vocabulary, spatial reasoning, and processing speed. They're good at predicting academic success because they measure skills that schools value, but they miss enormous swaths of human intelligence. Creativity isn't on the test, emotional awareness isn't measured. Practical problem solving in real world contexts barely appears. Musical ability, bodily intelligence, social intuition, all ignored. A high IQ predicts certain kinds of success, but plenty of people with average IQs lead remarkable lives, make important contributions, and possess wisdom that can't be quantified. And plenty of people with high IQs struggle in life, unable to translate test taking ability into actual accomplishment or happiness. Fact number 72. Savant syndrome appears in about 1 in a million people in the general population, but it's much more common in people with autism, occurring in roughly 1 in 10. Savants have islands of extraordinary ability, often in memory, calculation, music, or art, existing alongside significant disabilities in other areas. Some savants can perform calendar calculations in their heads, telling you instantly what day of the week any date in history falls on. Others can hear a complex piece of music once and play it back perfectly. Still others draw cityscapes from memory with photographic accuracy after viewing them briefly from a helicopter. These abilities emerge without training, sometimes appearing suddenly after brain injury. The most fascinating aspect is that savant abilities often come at a cost. The brain seems to have limited resources. When one region hyperspecializes, others may underdevelop. This suggests intelligence is a balancing act, a distribution of finite resources across multiple systems. Fact number 73. Synesthesia is a condition where senses blend together. Some synesthetes see colors when they hear music. Others taste words. Some see numbers as having personalities or inhabiting specific spatial locations. About 4% of the population has some form of synesthesia, though many don't realize their perception is unusual until they discover others don't experience the world the same way. Synesthesia might offer cognitive advantages in certain domains. Many famous artists and musicians are synesthetes. The cross wiring of senses can create unique associations, novel perspectives, creative insights that others miss. It's not clear if synesthesia causes creativity or if creative people simply notice and use their synesthesia more, but the connection is striking. Fact number 74. The nature versus nurture debate about intelligence has raged for over a century. Twin studies provide some of the best evidence. Identical twins raised apart still show remarkable similarity in IQ scores, suggesting strong genetic influence. But the correlation isn't perfect. Environment matters too. Current estimates suggest that genetics accounts for about 50 to 80% of IQ variation between individuals. But this number is misleading because it only describes variation in specific populations at specific times. In an environment where everyone has good nutrition, education, and healthcare, genetic differences become more apparent. In an environment with massive inequality, environmental differences dominate. More importantly, even if intelligence is partially heritable, that doesn't mean it's fixed. Height is highly heritable too, but average heights have increased dramatically over the past century due to better nutrition. Genes set potential ranges, but environment determines where within that range you land. Fact number 75. The Flynn effect refers to the observation that IQ scores have been rising about 3 points per decade for the past century in developed countries. Each generation scores higher than the last on the same tests. This can't be genetic evolution happening that fast. Something environmental is changing. The most likely explanations involve education, nutrition, reduced childhood disease, and changes in how we think. Modern life requires more abstract reasoning. We're constantly exposed to hypothetical scenarios through media, comfortable thinking about things that don't physically exist. Our great grandparents lived in a more concrete world. Their intelligence was sharp, but oriented differently. This should make us humble about IQ scores. They're not measuring some timeless absolute. They're measuring skills that happen to be valued and developed in a particular cultural context. Intelligence itself hasn't increased. What's changed is how we train and express it. Fact number 76. Poverty has devastating effects on cognitive development, and these effects start before birth. Children born into poverty are exposed to higher levels of stress hormones, both in the womb and throughout childhood. Chronic stress impairs the development of the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, regions crucial for learning and memory. Poor nutrition affects brain development. Exposure to environmental toxins like lead is more common in impoverished neighborhoods. Less access to books, educational toys, and enriching experiences means fewer opportunities for learning. Stressed parents have less time and energy for interactive play. By age 3, children from low income families have heard 30 million fewer words than children from professional families. These environmental factors create real differences in brain structure and function, but they're not permanent. Intensive interventions, improved circumstances, and supportive relationships can help brains catch up. The tragedy is that we often attribute to lack of ability what is actually lack of opportunity. Fact number 77. Giftedness brings its own challenges that people rarely discuss. Gifted children often feel isolated, unable to connect with age peers who don't share their interests or intensity. They may be perfectionist, devastated by mistakes, because learning has always come easily. They might underachieve, bored by school and never developing study skills or persistence. There's also something called asynchronous development, where intellectual, emotional, and social growth proceed at different rates. A 10-year-old might have the intellectual capacity of a 16-year-old, but the emotional regulation of an 8-year-old. This creates internal conflict and social difficulty. Being gifted doesn't guarantee success or happiness. It's simply a different way of being, with unique advantages and struggles. The notion that gifted children don't need support because they're already ahead is deeply misguided. Fact number 78. Learning disabilities like dyslexia, dyscalculia, and ADHD are not failures of intelligence. They're differences in how the brain processes certain types of information. A person with dyslexia might struggle with reading, but excel at spatial reasoning or creative problem solving. Their brain is wired differently, not worse. Many successful people have learning disabilities. Richard Branson has dyslexia. So did Steve Jobs. They succeeded not despite their differences, but often because of them. Learning to work around a disability develops resilience, creative problem solving, and lateral thinking. The brain finds alternate pathways when the usual ones are blocked. Society's insistence on measuring everyone by the same narrow standards does immense harm. We label children as less capable when they're simply different, discouraging them from pursuing their actual strengths. Fact number 70 go. As we age, intelligence changes but doesn't simply decline. Fluid intelligence, the ability to solve novel problems and think quickly, does peak in young adulthood and gradually decreases. But crystallized intelligence, accumulated knowledge and wisdom, continues to increase well into older age. Older adults are worse at memorizing random information, but better at seeing patterns based on experience. They're slower to process new data, but more adept at integrating it with what they already know. They might forget names, but remember the essence of conversations better than young people who fixate on surface details. The brain also has something called cognitive reserve. People who've been intellectually active throughout life, who've learned multiple skills and accumulated diverse knowledge, maintain cognitive function longer, even if their brains show physical signs of aging. The connections are so rich that the brain can root around damage, finding alternate pathways to accomplish tasks. Fact number 80. Creativity and intelligence are related but distinct. You can be highly intelligent in traditional measures, but not particularly creative. You can also be deeply creative with average IQ scores. Creativity involves divergent thinking, making unexpected connections, tolerating ambiguity, and being willing to pursue unusual ideas even when others dismiss them. Some research suggests there's a threshold effect. You need a certain baseline intelligence for creative achievement in most domains, but beyond that threshold, more IQ doesn't necessarily mean more creativity. What matters more is personality traits like openness to experience, willingness to take risks, and persistence in the face of failure. The creative process often involves letting the conscious mind relax so the unconscious can make connections. This is why good ideas come in the shower or on walks when you're not trying to think. The conscious mind is too linear, too conventional. Creativity requires accessing those deeper, wilder processes. Fact number 81. Emotional intelligence, popularized by Daniel Goleman in the 1990s, refers to the ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions in yourself and others. It includes self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Someone can have a high IQ but low emotional intelligence, brilliant at abstract reasoning, but terrible at navigating relationships. Research suggests emotional intelligence predicts life outcomes better than IQ in some domains, particularly career success and relationship satisfaction. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't read social cues, manage conflict, or motivate yourself through setbacks, you'll struggle. The good news is that emotional intelligence can be developed more readily than IQ. Learning to pause before reacting, practicing empathy, seeking feedback about how your behavior affects others. These skills improve with attention and practice. Fact number 82. Some cultures define intelligence very differently than Western industrialized societies. In many African cultures, intelligence includes social responsibility, cooperativeness, and obedience to elders. In some Asian cultures, doing your duty and maintaining harmony are signs of intelligence, while Western cultures emphasize individual achievement and innovation. These aren't just different values, they're different conceptions of what it means to think well. In a culture where survival depends on cooperation, social intelligence is paramount. In a culture facing rapid change, innovation and flexibility become crucial. Intelligence is partially defined by what a culture needs and values. This should make us question universal rankings. Who's to say that individual problem solving is more intelligent than group coordination? That verbal ability matters more than practical wisdom. Intelligence is contextual, shaped by environment and culture in ways that simple tests can never capture. Fact number 83. Genius often comes with trade offs. Highly creative people have higher rates of mood disorders. Mathematicians and physicists have higher rates of autism spectrum traits. Intense focus in one domain can mean neglect of others. The stereotype of the absent minded professor exists because people who devote enormous mental resources to abstract problems often struggle with practical everyday tasks. This isn't romanticizing mental illness or suggesting suffering is necessary for achievement, but it does suggest the brain has finite capacity. Extraordinary development in one area might come at the expense of others. The goal shouldn't be to be good at everything. It should be to find what you're good at and develop it while being honest about your limitations and finding support for them. Fact number 84. Intelligence and happiness aren't correlated. High IQ doesn't predict life satisfaction. In some studies, very high intelligence is associated with higher rates of anxiety and existential angst. Seeing patterns others miss can be isolating. Understanding complex problems without being able to solve them creates frustration. Wisdom might be more important than intelligence. Wisdom involves knowing what you don't know, understanding context, recognizing that most problems don't have simple solutions. An average intelligence person with wisdom often leads a better life than a brilliant person lacking perspective and self awareness. Fact number 85. Perhaps the most important thing to understand about intelligence is that it's not a competition. The diversity of human minds is a feature, not a bug. We need different kinds of thinkers: the person who sees patterns, the person who feels emotions deeply, the person who creates beauty, the person who organizes chaos, the person who asks questions no one else thinks to ask. You don't have to be good at everything. You just have to find what your particular brain does well and contribute that to the world. Intelligence, in the broadest sense, is the whole human endeavor, all of us together, thinking and creating and solving problems in our own unique ways. But we're not done yet, because there's one final territory to explore: the frontier where intelligence meets its own limitations and possibilities, where we ask not just what intelligence is, but what it might become, where the mystery deepens even as our knowledge grows. That's the horizon we're heading toward now. The questions without answers, the future unfolding, the strange and beautiful mystery of what it means to think at all. Somewhere in a laboratory, a computer is learning to recognize faces. It makes mistakes at first, calling a cat a dog, confusing a tree for a person, but it learns from each error, adjusting its internal parameters, and gradually it gets better. Eventually, it can identify faces more accurately than humans, processing thousands of images per second, never getting tired, never getting bored. This is artificial intelligence, and it's learning from us. Neuroscientists study the brain to understand how we think, and computer scientists use those insights to build machines that can think too. The student is studying the teacher, trying to replicate the most complex system in the known universe. Fact number 86. Artificial neural networks are modeled on biological neurons. Each artificial neuron receives inputs, processes them, and passes along outputs to other neurons. With enough neurons and enough training data, these networks can recognize patterns, generate text, play games at superhuman levels. They're not conscious, not alive, but they can perform tasks that once required human intelligence. The relationship is circular. We build AI by studying brains, then use AI to analyze brain data we couldn't process ourselves. Machine learning has helped decode brain activity, predict mental states from neural patterns, even reconstruct what someone is seeing from brain scans. We're using artificial minds to understand natural minds, a strange feedback loop where intelligence investigates itself. Fact number 87. Brain computer interfaces are getting closer to reality. Researchers have implanted electrodes in paralyzed patients' brains, allowing them to control robotic arms with thought alone. Others have created systems where blind people can see rough shapes through cameras wired directly to their visual cortex. Still others are working on devices that could enhance memory or allow direct brain to brain communication. These technologies sound like science fiction, but they're happening now. In coming decades, the line between biological and artificial intelligence might blur. You might augment your memory with external storage, access information instantly without typing or speaking, share thoughts directly with others. The human mind might become something more than human, enhanced by technology in ways we're only beginning to imagine. Fact number 88. But enhancement raises ethical questions. If you can boost intelligence with technology, do the wealthy get smarter while the poor fall further behind? Does cognitive enhancement become an arms race, everyone forced to upgrade just to keep up? And what happens to human connection if we can read each other's thoughts? Privacy of mind is the last refuge. Once that's gone, what's left? These aren't hypothetical questions, they're practical challenges we'll face this century. How we answer them will shape the future of human intelligence itself. Fact number 89. Meanwhile, we're discovering that intelligence isn't unique to individual brains. Groups can be intelligent in ways individuals aren't. Ant colonies solve complex problems through simple rules followed by individual ants. No ant understands the whole system, but the colony as a unit finds food, builds elaborate structures, adapts to changing environments. This is called collective intelligence. Humans do this too. Markets aggregate information from millions of individuals. Scientific communities build knowledge no single person could develop. Online collaboration creates products like Wikipedia that no individual or company could produce. The internet is connecting human minds in new ways, creating something like a global brain where each of us is a neuron. Fact number 90. Language shapes thought in ways we're only beginning to understand. Different languages carve up reality differently. Some languages have words for concepts English lacks. Others lack distinctions English makes. People who speak multiple languages sometimes feel like different people in each language, accessing different memories and emotional associations. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the idea that language determines thought, is too strong, but weaker versions are clearly true. Language influences what we pay attention to, how we remember, what categories feel natural. As languages die, we lose not just words, but ways of thinking, perspectives on the world that might never be recovered. Fact number 91. Play is more important to intelligence than most people realize. Young animals play, practicing skills they'll need as adults. Human children play constantly, and through play they learn physics by building towers, social rules by playing games, creativity by pretending. Adults who stop playing often become rigid in their thinking. Playfulness is a state of mind where failure doesn't matter, where you're free to experiment. This is when innovation happens, when novel connections form. Companies like Google have famously encouraged play among employees because it leads to breakthrough ideas. Intelligence isn't just serious analytical thought, it's also the lightness to explore, to try things that might not work, to approach problems like puzzles rather than threats. Fact number 92. Daydreaming activates the default mode network, and far from being wasted time, it's when your brain makes creative connections. Studies show that people who daydream more score higher on creativity tests. When your mind wanders, it's exploring associations, integrating information, stumbling upon insights that focused attention would miss. The modern world is hostile to daydreaming. We're constantly stimulated, always checking phones, filling every moment with content. But intelligence needs space, silence, boredom, even. The empty moments are when your unconscious mind does its best work. Fact number 93. Questions might be more important than answers. A good question opens doors, reveals assumptions, points toward new territory. Children are natural question askers, constantly interrogating the world. How do birds fly? Why is the sky blue? What happens when we die? As we age, we learn answers, but often stop asking questions. The most intelligent people remain question askers their whole lives. They're comfortable with uncertainty, curious about what they don't know. They understand that every answer generates new questions, that knowledge isn't a destination, but a journey without end. Fact number 94. Intelligence is not the same as knowing many facts. You can memorize encyclopedias and still not understand anything deeply. Real intelligence is about connections, seeing how ideas relate, understanding systems and context. It's about knowing which questions to ask, which information matters, how to think rather than what to think. This is why education should focus less on content and more on process, teaching students how to learn, how to think critically, how to recognize reliable information, These skills are more valuable than any specific facts. The facts will change. The thinking skills last a lifetime. Fact number 95. Adaptation is the essence of intelligence. The smartest organism isn't the one with the biggest brain or the most neurons. It's the one that can change its behavior based on circumstances. Intelligence is fundamentally about flexibility, trying new strategies when old ones fail, learning from experience, navigating novelty. This is why humans have been so successful as a species, not because we're the strongest or fastest, but because we adapt. We can live in deserts and tundra, eat almost anything, create tools for every challenge. Our intelligence is our adaptability. Fact number 96. The relationship between intelligence and happiness is complex. Being smarter doesn't automatically make you happier. In fact, high intelligence can bring suffering. You see problems others miss. You're aware of your own mortality and the vastness of your ignorance. You might feel alienated, unable to find others who think like you. But intelligence also enables deep appreciation, profound understanding, creative expression. It allows you to grasp beauty in mathematics, patterns in nature, meaning in chaos. Perhaps the question isn't whether intelligence brings happiness, but what you choose to do with the mind you have. Fact number 97. We are the universe understanding itself. Think about that. For billions of years, the universe was unconscious, matter following physical laws without awareness. Then, on at least one small planet, matter organized itself into life and eventually into brains complex enough to ponder their own existence. Through you, the universe is aware. The atoms in your body were forged in stars. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen you breathe, all of it created in stellar furnaces billions of years ago. You are made of stardust, and now that stardust has become conscious, thinking about stars. Fact number 98. The future evolution of human intelligence is unpredictable. We might merge with AI, enhancing our biological brains with digital components. We might genetically engineer smarter humans, though this raises profound ethical questions. We might create artificial intelligences that far surpass us, and then the question becomes what happens to human intelligence in a world where we're no longer the smartest entities? Or we might go in completely different directions. Perhaps we'll value wisdom over intelligence, compassion over capability. Perhaps we'll recognize that different types of minds, human and artificial, biological and digital, all have value and all contribute to the whole. The fact number 99. Despite everything science has learned, consciousness remains mysterious. We can map the brain, trace neural pathways, identify molecules and mechanisms, but we still don't know why subjective experience exists, why it feels like something to be you. This might be a question that neuroscience can answer eventually, or it might point to something beyond the physical, a mystery at the heart of existence. What we can say is this: you are improbable. The precise configuration of atoms that makes you you is vanishingly unlikely. The path from the Big Bang to this moment, with you listening to these words, required an unbroken chain of events spanning billions of years. You are a miracle of complexity, the universe's way of knowing itself. Fact number 100. Intelligence may never fully understand itself. This is the ultimate paradox. The tool trying to analyze the tool, the I trying to see itself. There might always be a gap, something inherently mysterious about consciousness, awareness, the felt quality of experience. But that's okay. Mystery isn't a problem to be solved. It's the nature of existence. You can study intelligence your whole life and still be surprised, still find new questions, still stand in awe of what the human mind can do. So here we are, at the end of our journey. We've traveled from ancient brains growing around campfires to modern minds contemplating their own existence. We've explored memory and learning, different types of intelligence, the mystery of consciousness. We've looked at the hidden influences beneath awareness and the stunning diversity of human minds. We've peered toward the future, where intelligence might become something we can barely imagine now. What can we take from all of this? Maybe just this: your intelligence is unique. The particular way your brain processes information, makes connections, understands the world, exists nowhere else in the universe. You're not a number on a test. You're a perspective, a way of being, a part of the larger whole. Be patient with yourself when learning feels hard. Your brain is doing its best with the tools it has. Be curious about how others think differently. Their intelligence complements yours, fills in gaps, sees what you miss. Be humble about what you don't know, because intelligence includes recognizing the vastness of your ignorance. And maybe, if you can, marvel a little at the strangeness of it all, that you exist, that you can think about thinking, that a 3 pound lump of matter in your skull can create poems and mathematics, music and science, love and wonder. The universe is conscious through you. And in this moment, as you drift towards sleep, you are part of the infinite mystery of mind, that precious and fragile and beautiful thing we call intelligence. Rest now. Let your thoughts slow. Let the questions dissolve. Your brain has work to do in sleep, consolidating memories, making connections, preparing for tomorrow. Trust the process. Trust the mystery. And know that in the morning, when you wake, you'll be slightly different than you were today. Your brain will have changed. You'll have grown in ways too subtle to notice, but absolutely real. That's what intelligence does. It keeps growing, keeps reaching, keeps wondering, and now it's time to let it rest. Good night.